afternoon, and welcome back. I hope you had the opportunity to watch some of our videos, and hopefully they were useful and beneficial to you. First, I want to take a minute to thank Chris for uploading some content. I hope you've seen some of those. Very useful information. And we look forward to seeing you, Jeff, anytime now. So today I'm going to talk about beliefs and belief systems. I think this goes nicely with what we've been speaking about. It's a very useful topic, a very in-depth topic actually. But I think the amount of time that we spend doing this, the 15 to 30 minutes, is probably good. I'm not sure how much attention people have for watching videos, so know that all of our topics, you're getting a superficial presentation. We do much deeper conversations about it when we're working with a group because of the dynamics. We're able to answer questions, and of course expand on those answers, which offers quite a bit more depth. What you get here is a monologue, not quite as useful, but not useless. So let's talk about beliefs. Why would beliefs and belief systems be an important topic? Well, what is a belief anyway? Let's think about that for a minute. A belief is something that you, not just you, but all of us, decide in our head is true, even though we don't have all the information that it would be required to understand it. Probably the most common belief systems that you think about are anything to do with life after death or politics. Remembering that beliefs are not facts. Beliefs also are the cause of all of our prejudices. And if you think that you don't have any prejudices, I encourage you to take a deeper look into that. So how does this happen? How do we end up with beliefs? Some of them are handed to us. When you're a kid, you're handed the belief of Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. But the interesting and most difficult part of a belief is that once you have it, we tend to unconsciously treat it as if it's fact, as if it's the gospel. And then once we do that, we have a hard time seeing anything that's not consistent with our belief. And that gets in our way. That gets in our way for learning and growth and understanding of the world around us and other people and ourselves. Just take a very basic, if you believed that you were generally worthless, and somebody offered you some criticism, some constructive criticism, hey, you forgot to do this, you might hear, hey, you forgot to do this because you're a piece of shit. Or at least it feels like that's what they were saying. And so your experience in that moment is filtered through that belief system. Now, one of the psychologically interesting things about beliefs is once you have them, there's a tendency to seek out any information or knowledge that supports your belief and to disregard or downplay information that goes against your beliefs. And in those moments, your beliefs get strengthened. In fact, I encourage you not to challenge somebody directly on their beliefs. Most of the time, what you'll get is anger and sometimes violence. And that is one of the things we do. We will defend our belief systems, even violently at times. In fact, one of my favorite and what I believe is a fairly profound quote is, as soon as human beings are more important than our beliefs, we'll stop killing each other. There's some significant wisdom in that. I think if you look at any time one human kills another, there's a belief system involved. I believed they were taking our resources. I believed that I needed the insurance company. I believed this would be easier than a divorce. I believed they were trying to hurt me. And I think that speaks volumes on the problems with having beliefs and belief systems. I think what human beings tend to do is we don't like an incomplete story, or we don't like to not truly understand the way things are, or how things work, or what's happening in the world around us. And so when there's a gap in knowledge, where we either can't know or don't know, we tend to put a belief system in there that works for our personal understanding. And that's not problematic in and of itself, but it becomes a problem when you can't see anything else. where you can't see beyond that belief. And so when you're presented with new information that might give you a different insight, you tend not to see it, and not believe it, and not listen to it. I'll give you some great examples if you want to see this in action. Watch Ancient Aliens. Those guys will talk as if every discovery they find is related to aliens. Or go to the website where the flat earth people are. Those people are solid in their beliefs. Or Finding Bigfoot, that's one of my favorites. You know, you'll see one of the members of the cast walking through the woods, and they'll come across a pile of sticks, and they'll say something like, oh, this is a Squatch camp, right? So I mean, it may be a Squatch camp, or maybe not. There's no way to know that for sure. But through that person's belief system, that is what it is. You're not going to talk them out of it. And that's the only way they can see it. So the question then becomes, what belief systems that you have that are hurting you or helping you, and how can you root them out? How can you release them to some degree? What I suggest that you have as a goal, if you want to really work on this kind of thing, is to learn to be fluid with your belief system, so that my belief system about any particular thing stays as it is until I'm presented with new information. And then I ask myself the question, for instance, in the Squatch camp example, I don't immediately go, well, that's not a Squatch camp. I ask myself, why is it not a Squatch camp? Do I have proof of that? Do I know for sure that that's not where a Sasquatch camped out? And if the answer is, I don't know, which is much more powerful than believing that I do know. And in that practice on a regular basis, I've been able to be fairly fluid with my belief systems and be open to new information and to learning new things about the world, but more importantly about myself. The reason why I think this goes very well with previous talks is when we talked before about self-worth, your self-worth that we spoke about on the last video that I did is a belief system. And in fact, it tends to be the belief system through which you filter all of your experiences. So if you have a self-worth of being a burden, then you experience the world as if you're a burden. And so you're sensitive to the things that people say to you that might further promote that for you. And you disregard the things where people tell you how helpful you are. Do you find that you have a hard time accepting compliments? That's likely because you're filtering those compliments through a belief system that's inconsistent with those compliments. And so that core belief about self tends to be the hardest one for you personally, for your day-to-day. But your other belief systems will get in your way as well. And once we treat our beliefs as fact, then we believe that we are right and anybody with another belief system is wrong. And that creates arguments and animosity and difficulties, both in interpersonal relationships and jobs, and sometimes in your overall career and life goals. And so starting to take an inventory of your beliefs and your belief systems, and to be more critical about what your own knowledge is. I have done this for a long time for myself, and I often ask myself, what do I actually know? You know, to give you an example, and I suppose I'm dating myself, but you know, there was a trial some years ago in the 90s, I think it was, on TV with the Menendez brothers who were accused of killing their parents. And there would be a tendency to believe what was presented to me, such that they killed their parents. But when I asked myself truthfully and honestly, was I there? Was there video? Right? So, you know, the idea of inconclusive isn't real. I mean, that's the idea of an objective reality, which is a whole nother talk that we'll have at some point. But to keep myself honest with myself, I constantly ask myself, what do I actually know? And what is just a belief? And one of the interesting things that you'll find is what you actually know is almost nothing. You know very little. You can describe your own experiences, the things that you saw and or were involved in. Beyond that, it's mostly belief systems. And in fact, we see this in science. You know, one year medicine will say, you know, the profession of medicine will tell us, oh, 1 cup of coffee a day is good for you. And then 2 years later, you hear a news story that says a cup of coffee a day causes Alzheimer's. Now, none of that, I don't know that any of those facts are really what happened, but I think that you can understand, and you have probably seen it. And it causes you to have a distrust in science. And you'll hold on to one scientific article that supports what you believe, and you'll disregard the rest. We do it in medicine too. It happens quite often, in fact. But there's an old saying, everybody knows this saying, I'll believe it when I see it. It's not actually how it happens. It's the other way around. I'll see it when I believe it. Because if you don't believe something to be true, like I said, you generally disregard that information. So if you don't believe that you're a good person, then you're going to generally disregard compliments to the contrary. And on the other side of that, of course, if you believe that you're a bad person, you will see your errors and your mistakes in your life will all be magnified for you. They'll seem like proof that you're a bad person. And so you used to say, you see the world through rose-colored glasses. There's a good chance that you're seeing the world through a set of shit-smeared glasses. But you don't have to. You can be done with that. And you can reconcile your beliefs with the world around you and be more open and fluid to them. I'm going to talk a minute about how beliefs create prejudices. Because remember what I said was human beings don't like to have gaps in knowledge. So what we do is we tend to fill those gaps with a little bit of information that we do get and then create a belief system. So for instance, I grew up in New Hampshire, which is a very white state, always has been. And in my experience as a young man, I don't believe that I ever met an Asian person. So the only information I had about Asians was from karate movies and Chinese food restaurants. So in my prejudice, my belief system, they could all karate chop me and cook me some good food, and that was really all I knew about them. And so when I interacted with Asian people, I was careful because they might be able to hurt me, and I assumed that they went home at night and all ate Chinese food. Which of course in retrospect seems ridiculous, but that is how a prejudice is created. So for instance, when we're talking about race or gender, start to ask yourself, what do I really know about people? Because I think once you do that, once you get to know any true human being, you're going to find that we're all pretty much the same. And so that your race and your gender and your profession and how much money you make and how physically attractive you are and whether or not you're a movie star, none of that matters. That is all a bunch of stuff that we use to create a prejudice. Here's another good example. Have you ever heard somebody refer to somebody who's famous, like an athlete or a singer or a movie star, and say, "Oh, I hate that person. He's a real jerk." I usually respond with, "Do you know him?" Because if you don't know him, then all you really know is what the media has presented to you. And no matter what they've done in the media, they're still human beings, right? Or the same thing about somebody who's nice, like, he's really nice. How many times as a society have we been shocked by a really nice person who was later found out to have been beating his wife or selling cocaine or something like that? In those moments, our belief systems are shaken up, our prejudices are rattled, especially when there's a mass amount of new information about that person. So I approach all people as if we're a base human, and I don't have any preformed beliefs about them. Now, interestingly, and this goes into what's often referred to as label theory, we have these prejudices. You think, when we're just talking about race, but we're talking about everything. For, say, somebody who's has substance use disorder, if you call them an addict or you call yourself an addict, that label, that title, comes with a set of prejudices that you may be aiming at even yourself. So, the first words that come to mind often when I do the class is, drugs, thief, dishonest, all these terrible things. But there's a prejudice against that human based on a title that we've given them. And we pigeonhole them, or we box them into that title. We think that is who they are, that one title. So I'm very careful about using titles for people. In the world of addiction, I don't call any of the people addicts. In fact, I specifically tell them I don't believe they're addicts. They're just human beings trying to figure it out like everybody else. And I try to exercise that on a regular basis. The moment that you offer me a title for somebody, he's a cop, or he's a soldier, or I remind myself that that title immediately limits that person and awakens a prejudice in me about that title. And through that caution, my interactions with other human beings have been far more rewarding. And I would say, for the most part, almost nobody lives up to that title that they're given. So be very careful about titles and labels, I guess, as it were. And not only the ones that you place on other people, but the ones you place on yourself. People will live up to them if they accept them. If you've ever seen the Stanford prison experiment, you can see this in real time. And if you haven't, watch it. And what happened there was some psychologists at Stanford University created a fake prison where a bunch of the college students were convicts or inmates, and a bunch of the college students were guards or correctional officers. And the longer they played that role, the more they lived up to it. They started hating each other. They started actually committing crimes and mistreating each other. And they meant it when they did it. They weren't acting anymore. This is an outstanding example of how beliefs about who somebody is changes the way that you experience the reality of interacting with them. And so be very, very careful about your belief systems, and open up your mind, and be willing to question your own beliefs about the world around you, other people, and maybe most importantly about yourself. In fact, ask yourself today, what titles have I embraced? I'm a mother, a brother, a father, a sister, a cousin. I'm an engineer, a mechanic. I mean, you're not, right? You're not. That's not all you are, is it? But sometimes when we embrace those titles, it becomes all we are. We live up to them. In fact, to go back to the idea of addict, if you are an addict who's ever been through treatment and or relapse, was there a time where you relapsed and you said to yourself, well, yeah, this is because I'm an addict? In that moment, you were living up to that title. And you have that title because you accepted it. And once you accept it subconsciously, you will live up to it. And that's a human thing. I can offer you a couple of other studies in the same area where there was a classroom of school kids, and the teachers were told in advance that these one or two kids were smarter than the other kids. And what do you think happened? Now, these kids were no smarter. They were just the same as everybody else. But what happened through the school years, they were graded higher, they were called on more in class, they got better reports from the teacher treated them more nicely, they allowed them perks in the classroom. And then they repeated this same experiment and told them that these two or three children were not as smart or were more difficult. And of course, the same thing happened. So they created a belief system and then measured the outcome. And because the teachers were just being human beings, they accepted the information they got as true without questioning it, accepted that belief system about those students, and then treated them as if their belief system was fact. And I think that's the problem. I think that's the main problem. I think we act as if our belief systems are fact, and they're not. In fact, not only are they not fact, they're usually not accurate. So I'm inviting you, I'm challenging you, in fact, to take a deeper dive into your belief systems, to check yourself and question yourself. Okay, and remember, you won't believe it when you see it. You'll see it when you believe it. Thank you again, and hopefully if you enjoy us, like us, subscribe, and share with anybody that you can think of. We'd really appreciate that. And any input that you want to have, just send it in a comment. Whenever we can get to it, we will. Most recently was an input that I should get a lapel mic, so I apologize for the sound. Lapel mic is on the list. And thank you again, and have a nice evening.